Once again, Penn State makes the second half adjustments, and this time they defeat Wisconsin 28-13. Beau Pribula. So many second half adjustments that the backup quarterback has to go in and lead the team to victory. No Drew Allar, no problem.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show, and thanks so much for joining the late live stream as we get finished with a night game here, primetime, for Penn State versus Wisconsin. It's a shame when your biggest opponents, well, I guess it's good for Wisconsin because they get biggest opponents in prime time. Penn State doesn't exactly get that luxury at home. So we're recapping all of it. We're talking about Beau Pribula. We're talking about how Penn State has gone on for another quality road victory. Once again, this is the third of the season. They're 7-0. They're still going to be in the top 4 of the country when it comes to the, again, college football playoff rankings are the only thing that matters. But just generally speaking, Penn State, this is a classic Penn State game for this 2024 team. Andy Kotelnicki and Tom, right? Both of them, Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen, both had to make significant halftime adjustments. And they come through. The defense holding Wisconsin to not only 3 points, but getting 7 of their own, right? The defense getting onto the scoreboard with that Jaylen Reed pick 6. And then on top of that, the offense having to not reinvent itself, but adjust. You don't know if you're going out into this, right? That injury that happens at the end of the first half, and Drew goes into the locker room and he tries to give it a go. He goes through warm-ups, has a conversation with, I imagine, not Kotelnicki's up in the press box, but Danny O'Brien, James Franklin, and they decide that he can't go. And it's like, okay, Beau Pribula, you're in. Decent amount of playing time a season ago. We've seen him in the Beau Pribula package, which really hasn't worked out that great. And I said, you know what? As long as Beau Pribula just gets settled in, give him some time to settle in, because this is his first serious in-game action since Rutgers in 2023? This is a road environment too. Beau Pribula has the it factor. I was never concerned when Beau can't get it done. No, just give him some time to find some rhythm, get some comfortability, trust his receivers, trust himself more importantly, right? There were some exchanges, some bobbles on some handoffs, right? He's got to get into in-game rhythm with everybody, and he did just that. But 28-13, this is the all-around win that Penn State needed. Wisconsin certainly gave Penn State a scare in the first half, and I talked about that in the live halftime reaction, saying that Wisconsin, the only thing that Wisconsin is doing differently is finishing off the drives, the stops defensively, because Penn State's doing the same thing, but they are just not finishing. That was the issue. Because Penn State across the board, everything you're looking at, overall stats, penalties, everything, turnover battle is, well, technically 1-0 because of the fumbled snap on the 4th down botched conversion where Drew Allar did not get the quarterback sneak because Julian Fleming had dropped that wide open pass. Penn State was the reason Penn State was losing to Wisconsin. Not Wisconsin was beating Penn State. Penn State continues to defeat itself in the first half. But that's why they play 4 quarters of football. That's why they play 2 halves. And Tom Allen and Andy Kotelnicki are making the necessary halftime adjustments to go out in the second half and look like a completely brand new team. And there were a lot of people were saying that this was 2021 all over again. Beau Pribula is clearly not prepared. This is Iowa 2.0 with Taquan Roberson. Penn State and James Franklin have learned from that experience. Right, that derailed that 2021 team ended up finishing 7-6. They lost to Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. Right, that's going to be a forgotten team, but that was an undefeated team. That was a top 5 team in the country at the time, and Penn State's their momentum really plays into the favor of Penn State. And it doesn't too under these James Franklin teams. So when they're really derailed and there's a lot of negative momentum, Penn State feels the nasty effects of that. But when there's a lot of positive momentum and things are rolling and everything's clicking, you can't, Penn State is a rolling rock going downhill. Like you cannot, they are a boulder going downhill. You cannot stop them. And at 7-0, we'll talk about the injuries, we'll talk about everything else that happened. We'll talk about the Ohio State matchup here, but think about this. West Virginia, USC, and now Wisconsin. All three of these are on the road. Those are tough road environments. You start with West Virginia, and I get it. They're not, USC is not living up to expectations. West Virginia isn't living up to expectations. Hey, they beat Arizona today. Wisconsin, I think, is punching above its weight class this season. But these are all, at the end of the day, tough road environments, and you had to do it back to back. I get it. It's the bye week. The bye week was in there. But Penn State went out to Los Angeles, then a bye week to get healthy, recover. But then you go back to Camp Randall. Like, Camp Randall's as tough as it gets in the Big Ten. Like, that is a rowdy environment. Any Penn State player, Penn State coaching staff will tell you that, especially from this game. When it was 21-13, and I could still hear the crowd, just... really, they were deafening from the TV here at home. And I said, man, they still think they're in it. Penn State has all the chips in their favor, and they still think that they are in it. I'll give the crowd a lot of credit. They made it interesting. But this exactly, now, I didn't expect Beau Pribula to go in and leading up to the predictions, previewing this game. This unfolded almost not to the point where Drew got injured, was held out of the second half, and Beau Pribula had to take over. But my point across this entire week of previewing Wisconsin and understanding this team, this is a one-dimensional team. You take away Tawee Walker, and look what happens offensively. Braden Locke barely completed 50% of his passes. Wide receivers were dropping passes. Braden Locke would just airmail them. Wisconsin cannot pass the football effectively. They cannot pass the football effectively, and it's because they do not have elite playmakers when it comes to quarterback and wide receivers, which, go figure, you need for the passing game. All Penn State had to do was build a double-digit lead, which they did, and Wisconsin was forced into obvious passing situations. Even when Penn State was up 21-13 and Wisconsin had the football, they were still playing from behind in crunch time, and you have to throw the football because time is against you. Once Penn State was in that situation where it was obvious passing downs, regardless, first down, second down, third down, Badgers got to throw the football here. You know it's coming, and Penn State was able to limit Wisconsin. It was that easy. Wisconsin is not dynamic enough to keep up with this Penn State team, but Penn State is also elite enough to a point where they can box Wisconsin in. So Wisconsin played good football in the first half, played solid defense. They capitalized on Penn State mistakes. They led it 10-7 at the half, but Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen are proving to be absolute geniuses when it comes to making these halftime adjustments. Beau Pribula and Drew Allar here. I mean, Drew Allar was playing almost a flawless game to that point. 14 of 18, 148 yards in the touchdown, and then Beau Pribula comes in, right? The reason this didn't turn into, I want to address the fact that it didn't turn into 2021. Then we'll talk to you, look at the comments and everything after we get to a sponsor, of course. But Beau Pribula was prepared. Okay, Taquan Roberson at the time, for anybody that remembers, if you're a new Penn State fan, welcome, right? Taquan Roberson was not prepared for not only the road environment, but just kind of commanding the offense in general. I think even a home game wouldn't have done any favors for Roberson at the time, and hindsight's 2020. But Beau Pribula was consistently getting in, whether that was a specific offensive package for him, whether that was playing in games late after Penn State had built a lead. There was an initiative to make sure that Drew was getting in behind Sean Clifford, that Beau Pribula was getting in valuable snaps when they took Drew Allar out of the game, and Penn State had they built significant depth. I want to see them continue that. If you can get Ethan Grunkmeyer in, I know he's been questionable at times. That's a different conversation. But my point is Penn State and James Franklin learned from that 2021 moment. So that 2021 game against Iowa is one of the biggest dominoes as to why Penn State won today against Wisconsin. There's obviously a lot of other factors. You got to recruit the quarterbacks to be here. You got to continue to develop them. But that moment in 2021 really did have an impact 3 years later. Penn State winning 28-13. Beau Pribula just has the it factor too. Again, once he was settled in, he was taking hits. He was delivering them, acrobatic throws, making the right reads. I had my question marks about Beau Pribula just as a pure passer. And man, he was going through his progressions. He was threading the needle. I was like, who is out here? Is this Drew Allar or is this Beau Pribula? Because Beau Pribula is showing some serious passing ability from the pocket. Prabula can lead this offense. Said it in the live halftime reaction. Prabula can absolutely lead this offense. Andy Kotelnicki will tailor it to him to maximize his strengths. And it's nice when you have an offensive coordinator that will do that. So in Beau Pribula's case, obviously you want Drew Allar to be healthy. And we'll talk about that throughout the post-game show here, a live post-game show here. But Beau Pribula can competently lead his version of Andy Kotelnicki's offense, the offense that is tailored more towards his skill set against Ohio State. Do I want Drew Allar to be as close to 100% as possible and available and be the starter against Ohio State? Absolutely. That is why he has been the unquestioned starter since last season. Mike Yurcich, Andy Kotelnicki, it's always been Drew Allar as the starting quarterback. However, there is not a significant drop-off. The offense changes. And honestly, there's some things now that Ohio State has to game plan for. This gets interesting. I'll leave it with this. We'll take a break and then check in on the comments. Ohio State has to prepare for Drew Allar and Beau Pribula. This is truly Andy Kotelnicki's work of the two quarterback system. Ohio State is going to be busy chasing ghosts, essentially, because James Franklin and Penn State are not going to give an injury report. We know that all too well. So if Drew Allar isn't 100%, or if he is 100% and they wanted to rest him for the Ohio State game, they knew they were confident enough that Beau could get the job done on the road at Wisconsin. I mean, that's some serious confidence. If you say, hey, QB2, we're looking ahead, hypothetically speaking. I don't know that for a fact, but you got to play the long game in college football. If Drew Allar is not 100%, they felt comfortable enough to go to Beau Pribula, and it all works out 28-13. But Ohio State really has to look. They got to watch a lot of game film and prepare for two quarterbacks, and Penn State is not going to give them a shred of evidence as far as who is available and when they are available. I appreciate everyone for checking out this live show. We are going to take a break and hear from some of our sponsors, and when I come back, we'll talk it through in the comments section. Thanks for joining this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that is to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol for the best results. Make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself. Hydrate. Get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is back with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. And today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a great daily fantasy sports app. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And yes, you can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with injury insurance. So your lineups will stay in play even if one of your players gets hurt. injury insurance. If your player leaves in the first half and does not return, PrizePicks will keep your lineup alive. Do you think that Saquon Barkley is going to go over 85 rushing yards? Do you think George Pickens with Russell Wilson in at quarterback is going to go over 55 receiving yards? You can cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, the PrizePicks app, use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is PrizePicks. Run your game. I appreciate everybody's patience here on the live show, and thanks for, again, conversation as Penn State it looked like a trap game at first, but we know that this Penn State team is they are masterful when it comes to second half adjustments. R. Gra says, can somebody tell me where all the people that said Penn State was in trouble? It's almost like they don't realize that the game is two halves. Pointed it out, completely agree. Tom Allen, again, it's kind of like I don't want to call it survive and advance, but it's, survive and then adjust. That's really all they're doing. And they do it on the fly, which is really incredible. To have your backup quarterback go in to Camp Randall, a Wisconsin team that is getting better week by week by week. Luke Fickell has that team that program in the right direction. Just be on the lookout for them in 25, 26. Beau plays the game of his life, and the second half defense plays lights out. Couldn't sum it up any better. I think the defense certainly played a hand in all of this, and we can go through the statistics as well and see who stood out. I obviously have my select players. Jaylen Reed. Jaylen Reed isn't even he's starting to get back into his comfortable position. So he's much better around the line of scrimmage as that lion, that hybrid linebacker safety where he can just kind of roam and do whatever he needs to do. I noticed that Cam Miller early in the game, I didn't pay attention to it as much, or I guess I didn't notice it as much because maybe Penn State went away from it again, second half adjustments. But early in the game, Cam Miller was playing too high safety with Zach Seyko, or at least was bailing into it. So maybe the slot cornerback, and they were using some disguises there where he was because he's been playing in the slot. He's been that third cornerback. They haven't gone to Dejon Lane enough. I saw Dejon Lane a decent amount for a road game against a Big Ten conference team. But Cam Miller has been that guy that they've turned to since KJ Winston has been absent and is most likely not going to return this season. Most likely not going to that. That is my opinion, but based on the way things are looking with him being away from the team, and that's been confirmed by James Franklin, if you're away from the team like that, you're probably not returning for the season. But Jaylen Reed needed this kind of game, not only for himself, but for the defense, because Reed has been that X factor. KJ Winston allowed Jaylen Reed to get into a natural playmaking role from that line position. So it's not even about Jaylen Reed. It's about Dejon Lane. It's about Cam Miller. It's about Zion Tracy, other defensive backs that have stepped up through these past few games that have allowed Jaylen Reed to not play out of position and play where he is better suited so that the defense can be at its best. I said right almost like I'm talking 60 seconds before it happened, maybe 2 minutes, where Penn State where Jaylen Reed made the pick six. And I said, hey, the defense is going to have to bail out the offense. Beau Pribula, a little bit of a slow start here. It's on the defense to flip the momentum back to Penn State. And oh, look at that, Jaylen Reed with the pick six. Also something that I pointed out, and this was over on X, Twitter, kind of live posting about the game, and saying that Penn State's defense is not forcing enough turnovers. They are not making enough plays here. Zachy Wheatley and Braden Locke is notorious for throwing an interception or two. Like, you can guarantee that Wisconsin's quarterback is going to throw a pick, maybe even a pick six. And I thought, hey, Zachy Wheatley, but don't forget about Jaylen Reed, because he can just line up anywhere. He will line up anywhere. Whereas Zachy Wheatley is over the top of the defense. But Zach Wheatley does not get left out of this conversation as well. Even though he hasn't been forcing turnovers frequently, Zach Wheatley led the defense with 10 total tackles, and that was double. So Jaylen Reed, Dom DeLuca, Elliott Washington here all had 5 tackles apiece. Zach Wheatley has become more of that run-stuffing, hard-hitting safety. 8 solo tackles, 10 in total. He's supposed to be that quote-unquote turnover king, right? That's his specialty. But Zach Wheatley has proven to be that all-around safety that Penn State needs, and over the top. He is able to fill the play where needed, being that last line of defense. Zach Wheatley is really not getting enough credit for how much he has developed as a total complete player. Steven says, Beau has a better arm than I thought. Honestly, in the limited action that we've seen from Beau, it hasn't been the prettiest, and I've had my questions about, okay, when they get into 3rd and 8 situations, because it's not going to be easy sledding. You're not going to get 3rd and 2 every single time, even though Beau is a running quarterback. You're more likely to get those situations because Penn State's just going to continue to chip away and sustain those drives. That's the Beau Pribula offense. That is when he is running the show. But in those obvious passing situations, Beau had zip, he had accuracy, and he made smart decisions. He was making the right decision. I think that's the most important part of it, is that, okay, yes, the ability is one thing, but that capability of knowing where to go with the football, that's a veteran quarterback right there. And I think I've said this before on previous episodes in the off season or anything else, kind of these like season, like previews and discussions. Beau Pribula can start at other places. He's at Penn State, and it's a good thing that he's willing to take on that QB2 role and that hybrid, specialty quarterback package, the Tommy Stevens, the Will Levis. He can run the show. He can run an offense, and Andy Kotelnicki is playing to his strengths. I know we're going to get into Ohio State quite a bit. Do you think we have a good chance of beating Ohio State next week? We can start to get into the Ohio State game, because I do want to point out a lot of the positives from this Wisconsin game. Again, the defense holding Wisconsin to 3 points in the second half, and getting 6 points and then the PAT for the interception that Jaylen Reed had. Also, just to kind of real quick, because everybody wants to talk about the next game, right? Kobe King, I thought, had a good game. Alonzo Ford was somebody to keep an eye on. He's quietly been a contributor. At 320 pounds, he almost plays like a defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid. I will say that Penn State kind of, building up some of these injuries. Like, that was a physical game against Wisconsin, and you weren't going to get anything less. You weren't going to get anything less against Wisconsin. Drew Allar went down. A.J. Harris went down later in the game. Anthony Donko's been dealing with bumps and bruises. Nicholas Singleton obviously doesn't look like himself. And then Dani Dennis-Sutton. You were missing a lot of key pieces leaving this Wisconsin game. Now, that's not to say they can't get healthy or that they won't be ready, but then you start to add them up, and it's KJ Winston, right? That one stings. Penn State could really use him, definitely, because he's one of the best defenders that Penn State had. Arguably, him and Abdul Carter were in the competition for the best overall defender. But now it's your starting quarterback. Now it's your starting defensive end. Now it's your starting safety. Now it's your starting cornerback number 1. A.J. Harris did get up, so I'm not as concerned about that. But your starting right tackle, Nolan Rucci, he's played okay. He hasn't been perfect. He's been okay. I think we've seen a good amount of struggles, so it's not fair of me. I've said that Nolan Rucci should be a starter, but he still has a little bit of ways to go. But fortunately, Penn State got him in a backup role where he can come in and play where he needs to at left tackle, right tackle. That versatility, he's proven to be extremely valuable, even though he hasn't been a dominant force on the line of scrimmage. So long story short, back to all these things start to pile up. I alluded to Ohio State having a dilemma here. How do you approach this week of practice? I imagine they're going to say, okay, Drew Allar came out with a knee brace. He looked like he could have went, but they didn't want to risk anything. He clearly wasn't 100%, but I think Ohio State has certainly a dilemma where they're going to have to game plan for Drew Allar first and then Beau Pribula as well. And that's just going to take a lot of time and effort, and that's going to lead to issues. You can't fully prepare for one or the other. So if Drew Allar does play a bulk of the game next week against Ohio State, as Ohio State's defense, you can only prepare for that at 50%. And the same thing with Beau Pribula. Or does Ryan Day take the gamble and say, all right, we're gonna totally focus on if Drew Allar's leading the offense, because there's no way that Beau Pribula is the guy if Drew Allar is good enough to go in a week from now. So what does Ryan Day do? I imagine they are going to go 50%, 50%. They got to watch as much film, as much tape, prepare and do a walkthrough. And that's just a big headache. That is just a massive headache for Ohio State. To start to briefly discuss them, and I'll go back and forth between Ohio State and Wisconsin to briefly discuss my thoughts on Ohio State. This opened up preseason as a 4.5-point spread in favor of Ohio State, even before anything had happened. Ohio State losing to Oregon, all these things. The spread has now been adjusted. I saw it last at 3.5. It was at 3.5 Ohio State. So that means that Vegas and the sports books think that this is going to be a close game. This is going to be a single score game. And one way or another, you're getting a competitive college football game that is, well, Oregon seems to be that one of the Big Ten championship teams, but you're getting two more Big Ten championship caliber teams. Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon have proven to be the best team. I can't believe I'm saying that. Indiana? I'm saying Indiana in this conversation. But those four teams have proven that they are in the upper echelon. They are in the top tier of the Big Ten. I know Ohio State has the one loss. They got a scare against Nebraska. I get that. But those are still the top four teams in the Big Ten. So you're getting a close game. I don't like the matchup on the line of scrimmage. I think Ohio State's defensive line is better than Penn State's offensive line. I've been very critical of Penn State's offensive line, but now Penn State hasn't been in an unfavorable matchup. Wisconsin's defensive line is not good. USC's defensive line is not good. Obviously, UCLA, Bowling Green, West Virginia. Those front sevens have not been strong. They haven't been stout. You're getting Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, and I'm blanking on because I don't have the Ohio State depth chart memorized, but I think you could quietly say that there are 3 first-round picks on the defensive line, at least second-round picks. JT Tuimoloau could have been a first-round pick this season. Jack Sawyer probably a second-round pick, and then they have a defensive tackle that's getting first, second-round consideration as well. And they all returned. Like, they should not be back on Ohio State's team. Take away NIL and transfer portal and all that stuff. Those guys would be off to the NFL because that's just like they are too good for college football. They're back because they can make NIL money. They said, hey, the NFL can wait, and that's where they are. So Ohio State having 3 fringe first-round talents on the defensive line. Penn State does not have that on the offensive line. Andy Kotelnicki is going to have to scheme some things to limit whoever's at quarterback. Beau Pribula, Drew Allar, it doesn't matter. He is going to have to scheme some things to take pressure off of that matchup with Penn State's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line. I also think about, okay, A.J. Harris definitely needs to be available. Hopefully him leaving the game at the end of the game is of no concern. I don't know to this point. Carnell Tate had just over 100 yards against Nebraska today. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka. Smith and Egbuka are first-round players. A.J. Harris, I would like to believe that he has first-round potential, but I don't, like, I'm just trying to use a, measuring stick barometer here to say, okay, where are, how talented are these guys are. I don't know that Penn State has enough defensive backs. I think Penn State's going to have to run a lot of zone against Ohio State to account for all 3 of those wide receivers. Will Howard is an above average quarterback. I won't say he's an elite quarterback. I can say that with ease that he's not an elite quarterback, but he's a playmaker. He's played a lot of college football. He's disciplined. He's confident. According to him, he said this after the game against Nebraska, that it's personal for him. He's admitted that this is personal because Penn State overlooked him in his original recruiting cycle. That's fine. He's from the state of Pennsylvania. But Will Howard can make plays. They have a run game that you have to respect too. So Penn State has faced other teams that, okay, they're Wisconsin, one-dimensional. Ohio State is not one-dimensional. Let's not forget that they have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Quinshon Judkins transferred in from Ole Miss. Those are, again, how are you evaluating them? But those are first, second, or third round players there. At nowhere past day 2 for Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins. So Will Howard has his options available to him with 3 elite wide receivers, 2 elite running backs, and then a capable, intelligent, disciplined quarterback that has dual threat capabilities. You got to account for his legs, and he can make the necessary throws. Is he elite? No, but he has an amazing supporting cast. Those are the matchups that I look at. Penn State's offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line. And then the Penn State secondary against Ohio State's wide receivers. And how are you going to account for that? Because, okay, if you try to double Jeremiah Smith, okay, then you go to Emeka Egbuka or Carnell Tate now, who's beginning to emerge. Or if you're selling out for the pass, hey, look, you got 3 runners that you got to deal with. Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, or Will Howard at quarterback. So to sum it all up, the Ohio State matchup is Penn State's toughest one. I do not put a lot, and I wanted to talk about this on the postgame show too here, which I will. I do not put a lot of stock into that Nebraska game. That was definitely, you want to talk about a trap game. That's the definition of a trap game. Nebraska is railing. Dylan Raiola doesn't look as good as advertised. He's an overhyped freshman. There's no way that Nebraska comes in to Columbus and gives them a battle. They absolutely did. Nebraska's defense is still respectable. They're not top 10, but they are still respectable. Dylan Raiola is learning. He's only going to get better. And Nebraska had nothing. They have nothing to lose. Their season is definitely on the back burner here. Try to get a bowl game, but the things that they, maybe a dark horse to try to contend for the Big Ten, something like that, those aspirations are behind them. So, hey, let's go into Columbus and play spoiler here against the Buckeyes. Buckeyes are a little banged up, guys on the offensive line. So there are some matchups that Penn State hasn't had, like strong positional matchups that Penn State hasn't had to be tested at. In the trenches, USC is as close as it gets with wide receiver playmakers and stuff like that. So that's that. As of right now, in my mind, Ohio State's the better team one way or another. Does Penn State have a chance? Absolutely. As we start to go through position by position, look at the matchups. What is Ohio State really doing well? What is Chip Kelly? What kind of plays is he calling? Run heavy, pass heavy? I don't have all of that off the top of my head. But what I can tell you is that on paper, Ohio State is better than Penn State. And at this point in time, regardless of quarterback, I would pick Ohio State over Penn State. But I go through everything. That's why we have that week. Penn State and Ohio State have a week to prepare for each other. I have a week to prepare and research for this game. So one final break, and then we'll go through some more comments, recap Penn State, Wisconsin, or talk ahead Penn State versus Ohio State here on a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all of the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's all it takes is $5 or your first $5 bet to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com. And did a little bit of typing here to get the spread pulled up in front of me, and it's been pulled off the board because of the uncertainty for Penn State's quarterback spot. Drew Allar, Beau Pribula, that definitely impacts the lines for this game. I will tell you this, Penn State and Ohio State opened up at a 4.5-point spread with Ohio State as the favorite, and it moved to 3.5 before this game, before Penn State played against Wisconsin and Ohio State played against Nebraska, and now it is off the board. That's a big noon kickoff on Fox. Penn State versus Ohio State. We'll see how the spread and the total adjust given what Penn State decides to do at quarterback. But again, that is FanDuel. All you got to, if you want to bet the lines when they're available, let's look at some other lines here. Penn State is plus 1,100 to win the 2025 College Football Playoff Championship. If you like those odds, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. go back through the comments. Appreciate everybody's patience. Trying to look through these to make sure. What is the status of Dani Dennis-Sutton? So try to answer, see if there's questions in here. What is the status of Dani Dennis-Sutton? Is he finished? I don't think he is. He tried to give it a go in the second half. I can tell you from what NBC reported and from what I saw with the eye test here, it's a groin injury. It looks to be a groin injury there. And the way that he was shaken up on the play, they had a review and everything. I thought he cramped, but it looks like he pulled the groin muscle. So again, Dani Dennis-Sutton is invaluable. The defensive end depth. Me and Vanover had a really good game. Zariah Fisher, someone who's been injured, probably if he is going to be back this season, it wouldn't be until most likely playoff time. But Penn State might make some adjustments here. And this might be a question worth asking. With all the players that you have at defensive tackle, is it worth playing more, like kind of having Abdul Carter as that stand-up roaming defensive end that they've done, and then just roll with more of a bigger front? Devontae Thomas, Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, Keziah Izzard, right? They have the depth at defensive tackle, so why not just play to your strengths? Run 3 defensive tackles and a roaming Abdul Carter and cycle in. So you're almost, what if they go to a 5-2? I think maybe I'm putting the cart before the horse here and they don't make those kinds of wholesale changes. But that would certainly be interesting if Tom Allen does that kind of chess where if Dani Dennis-Sutton isn't 100%, or does, unfortunately, wooden desk. I hope he plays against Ohio State. I don't know for sure at this point in time. We'll get updates. But if Dani Dennis-Sutton is not available, I could see Penn State doing something different something that's not on film. You don't have it on tape. How does Ohio State prepare for it? Do you assume that Penn State's just going to make a radical change like that? We'll see. We'll see. It'll be interesting. They have the depth at defensive tackle, so we'll see what happens here. PSU Jim. Zach, you're right. Not like last year. Ohio State will have to defend the whole field, and Ohio State's offensive tackles are terrible. They're banged up at the one tackle spot, I think, at least. Again, I know from listening to Jay, my counterpart at Locked On Buckeyes, respect his work. Go check it out if you'd like to kind of start to do some digging or some research for yourself. Ohio State is dealing with some injuries. They're dealing with some injuries in the secondary. They had a safety that got a targeting call. He was hit with a targeting call late in the fourth quarter against Nebraska. He will have to miss the first half of Penn State, Ohio State. That's a starting player. I think I don't want to say this because I don't know for sure. I think some other defensive backs are dealing with some injuries. Quinshon Judkins is dealing with an injury, offensive line. So now Penn State and Ohio State, I would say before this Wisconsin game, Penn State was projecting to be healthier than Ohio State, but it's not the case anymore. It's not the case anymore. I think they're kind of on a level, you're missing impact players at key positions there. And PSU Jim, again, not sure why Wisconsin would talk trash about Penn State. They haven't beaten us for over 10 years. It has been quite some time. It's been a while. I think it was 2012 because Christian Hackenberg went into Camp Randall. Adam Brenneman, that was the Christian Hackenberg, Adam Brenneman game. 2016 Big Ten Championship. And I thought that was interesting. Ryan, my counterpart at Locked On Badgers, said that game was stolen. That Penn State stole that game away from Wisconsin. I didn't realize that was a game that Wisconsin, you blew a 28-7 lead. I didn't realize that Penn State got lucky and that game was stolen, right? No, the Big Ten, Penn State earned the Big Ten championship. Wisconsin, hold on to a 28-7 lead. Why is that up for debate? But then they lost the game at Beaver Stadium in 2018, and then 2021, Jaquan Brisker saves the day, and now here we are in 2024. Like Wisconsin can, whether it's Paul Chryst or whether James Franklin has Wisconsin's number. Wisconsin is not an issue here. I'll give props to Luke Fickell though. They are headed in the right direction, but he runs a system that needs an elite playmaking quarterback and some more competent. A lot of drops in that game. Really, Wisconsin is not playing to its players' strengths. Tawi Walker was taken away. It was all smooth sailing from there for Penn State. Going through some more of the comments here. Let's see, Trevor. Yeah, I saw that, Jim. Unfortunately, we are only at a 31.8% win rate, but something tells me that will change next week. We're assuming that's ESPN's rating. ESPN has its projected odds for each game. And I think Penn State was given about a 30% chance to win that game against Ohio State. That's not what a 3.5, 4-point spread says. I think a 70% chance is like a 7 to 10 point spread in this case. Drew Allar or Beau Pribula, I would probably give, if Beau Pribula is the starter, I think the spread will probably become 6.5. I think Vegas and the books will probably give 2 more points to Ohio State. Just if Drew Allar is confirmed to be out, if there's a report, James Franklin, I don't think he will. I don't think he will confirm that report. I don't think he'll give an injury report, especially with the biggest game of the year. Because if Penn State beats Ohio State, they're going 12-0. They are not losing to Minnesota. They are not losing to Purdue. They are certainly not losing to Maryland. Certainly not losing to Purdue either. Washington quietly, I think, will give Penn State headaches, but that's a game that they still win. I like Washington. I think they have a lot of talented players. They are a makeshift team. They are essentially a college football fantasy team, and they haven't figured out how to play together. Okay, this is a makeshift free agency team. Jed Fish is a good coach. I would have rather Penn State play with Washington earlier in the season than later in the season. The actual official whiteout will help. Washington having to travel across the country again will certainly help. Penn State is better than Washington, but Washington looking to play spoiler. They now have 4 losses, but that is a talented team. There are talented players on that team that just don't have a lot of chemistry. That's really Washington's issue. It's not a coaching issue. It's not a player issue. It is, we have no chemistry because we've never played football together before, and we replaced the entire national championship runner-up team. Let's see what other elephant in the room is beating Ohio State. I'll add state for you. Yes, it is. Penn State, this has been pointed out, Penn State needs to make a new highlight. The highlight that I see every time when talking about Penn State versus Ohio State, it's the blocked field goal. It's legendary. It's iconic. Marcus Allen, Grant Haley, the 24-21 when nobody was giving Penn State a shot in that game. I did. I actually picked that. Funny enough, when I was in college, I did pick Penn State to win that game. Everyone will just have to take my word for it. However, it's been so long. Penn State should have won in 2017. They should have won in 2018. I'm kind of blanking on some. 2019 was out of there. 2020 was awful. 2021 wasn't that close. 22, 23. But they should have went on a 3-game winning streak against the Buckeyes, and they never did. I think that's where James Franklin kind of gets the stereotype that he can't win in big games because they were winning by double digits and Urban Meyer outcoached him. It's those 2 specific games in 17 and 18 that lead to all the slander, although justified against James Franklin and criticism of his coaching ability. That's where that comes from. Really, those 2 games and some select other ones against Michigan and stuff. Penn State is overrated, and then, okay, so he's speaking hypothetically. I was like, whoa, Penn State is not overrated here. He's speaking hypothetically, I think. Penn State is overrated, then their team is trash after losing to the backup. So I guess this is Wisconsin in the case. Wisconsin, what were they supposed to do, right? That's the thing. Beau Pribula he's capable he's a 3rd-year quarterback too. Don't think of him as, he's a redshirt freshman. He's a backup for a reason. He could start other places. And he's prepared, and there is a select portion of the offense that is for him. So as Wisconsin, I thought that Beau Pribula could actually help them. And it's not because don't get me wrong, I don't want Drew Allar to be injured. I don't want him to be hurt. But if he's unavailable, it's not that Beau Pribula can't run the offense. He just needed to get into rhythm. The Beau Pribula package was not indicative of Beau being able to run the offense as a whole. You have to get into rhythm. You have to get consistency. So, Beau, you're as cold as ice. Why don't you come off the bench and run this play on 2nd and 5? There was really no rhyme or reason to it. And then, it didn't work. Back to the bench you go. Right? As a quarterback, how do you... Seriously, you need to get into rhythm. You need to build up some steam, some momentum, and that's all Beau Pribula needed. He has the it factor. I like Penn State's chances better with a healthy Drew Allar, but there's no reason to believe that Beau Pribula cannot lead Penn State to a victory over the Buckeyes. There is absolutely no reason. Ohio State's offensive tackles are terrible. With the crowd noise next week, expect serious pressure on Howard. It's going to be up to the defensive line to get pressure. That could be more of a defensive game. I don't think there's going, especially if Beau Pribula is the quarterback. If he plays the majority of the game, and you know they do run it, I'd be intrigued to see if Penn State actually runs the 2 quarterback system with Andy Kotelnicki, since he did it at Kansas successfully. Against Ohio State, different story, tougher competition. That's a top 5 defense. That's a top 5 defense in the country. I think that's a defensive battle one way or another, but more so with Beau Pribula because they're going to run the football more. They're going to try to sustain drives, keep the football away from Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson. That's going to be the game plan. That could be a 2017 game, honestly, or maybe a 24-20 game, something around there. I'm not giving. I don't think either team makes it to 30 at this point in time. It is hard to believe that they thought Allar had a serious injury and that they would have let him try to warm up and give it a go. I would be surprised if Allar isn't ready next week, not sure on mobility. That's what I mean. If Beau Pribula at 100% gives you a better chance of winning than a 75-80% version of Drew Allar, or run the 2 quarterback system, because we know that Allar is the better passer. He's better at reading defenses too. So you're almost going to have that hybrid. You're going to have that hybrid game plan here. They need to force turnovers next week. It's tough to do when you have as many playmakers as Ohio State does, but it's not that Will Howard doesn't. It's not like he's perfect when it comes to protecting the football. They definitely. Yeah, forcing turnovers is huge because Penn State isn't getting enough pressure. Braden Locke had a decent amount of time today. I think Wisconsin's offensive line had a good performance in pass protection. Now, Locke still did get the football out fairly quickly, but no sacks. No sacks for the Penn State defense. They need to run slants with the wide receivers big time next week. Offensively, Penn State, and that's another matchup where Penn State's not going to be favored in. Penn State's wide receivers versus Ohio State's defensive back. I like Ohio State secondary. Caleb Downs, Denzel Burke. Those are other first-round type of players there. Is it going to be a whiteout next week? I think is this the helmet? This is the helmet stripe game. This is that slipped my mind because I think this is the helmet stripe game where Penn State, because Illinois was the whiteout energy game. Washington is the official whiteout. And this is kind of the pseudo whiteout where the 50-yard line is dressed in blue to mimic the Penn State helmet. And then, this is the stripe out. Okay, so thank you for correcting me. This is why we go to the comments. Some people, you know better than... No, now we have the helmet stripe. Okay, we're going back. I thought it was the helmet stripe because they wanted to get the whiteout just in case NBC had the game. We're getting close to an hour here, so, oh my goodness. I really appreciate everybody joining the conversation. I really do. Thank you for this. Next week is about what the offense can do to answer what Ohio State does. That's a tough one for me. I think it's on the defense. I really do. I think it's because this isn't, with what's at stake, if Ohio State drops to 2 losses, can you imagine the discourse? With Ryan Day keeping his job, right? There's going to be some angry Buckeye fans that are going to call for Ryan Day's job if Penn State, and let's manifest it, right? If and when, I don't know. I do favor Ohio State at this point in time. But all kidding, in all seriousness, if Penn State does win this game against Ohio State, they will be calling for Ryan Day's job immediately. They will not wait until he gets back on the bus, the plane, everything. There will be some rowdy Ohio State fans and probably some huge boosters or people that are actually heavily involved with and have influence over the football program that will publicly call for his job. Ohio State to go to, that's why the Nebraska game was so interesting to me. I didn't think they were going to lose that one, but it was close enough where if they did lose that game, I'm sitting there thinking he is going to be fired. He will be canned on the spot. With with the rumored alleged 20 million in NIL that was made to buy this team, there is no excuse. Oregon's understandable. You fly across the country, you lose by a point, really, and they should have won that game. That's on Chip Kelly. I don't put that game on Ryan Day so much as I do with Chip Kelly, because Chip Kelly's the head coach of the offense. right? Ryan Day's the head, James Franklin, head coach of the team, but Andy Kotelnicki's the head coach of the offense. Same case with Chip Kelly here. Chip Kelly should have ran the football when he was in field goal range, but instead decided to pass, and then everything kind of mounted up, incompletions, penalties. Oregon got some momentum back. That one's on Chip Kelly. I don't know why they weren't running the football when they got to the Oregon 30-yard line. But so Ohio State, if they get to 2 losses, it really, like, the alarms are going to sound in Columbus, because there is no reason, with $20 million spent, allegedly, and the amount of talent that could have gone to the NFL and did not, and this is your worst team as Ryan Day coaching this team. Oh my, get your popcorn. It might, from Penn State side of things, it might be interesting. It might be very interesting. Zach, don't overlook Minnesota. That can be a tough game on the road like Wisconsin. I agree. No, I agree. But I look at it as Penn State is still better than Wisconsin. I look at that as Illinois, Minnesota. I look at Minnesota comparable to a Wisconsin too. But Max Brosmer, same thing. Take away Darius Taylor, and Penn State wins that game. Albeit Minnesota's defense is quietly top 25, and they force a lot of turnovers. So I think it's Ohio State's easily the toughest, and then I would say Minnesota. Maybe I'm giving too much credit to Washington, but I think Washington is pretty. I think they will be better, especially with that bull in the China shop mentality. I think they will try to, play spoiler against Penn State. It's the whiteout too, right? They're going to get up for that game. And then Purdue, Maryland, those are easy ones. Hey, look at that. If you see the sign in the background here on the live stream, that's the helmet stripe game against Ohio State. So there we go. Thank you, Team Ticker. So no, I won't. I just know, looking at it, Minnesota is just as one-dimensional, but protect the foot. Now, Penn State doesn't have a turnover problem offensively. Yes, against USC, granted, they did turn the ball. Drew Allar threw 3 interceptions. 2 of them were actually consequential. I don't really count that Hail Mary. But other than the USC game, Penn State's offense does not turn the football over. Before tonight, Penn State was a 3.5 point underdog against Ohio State. Yes, they were. But now the books are going to pull those lines because they don't know who the quarterback's going to be, right? Beau does help the running game a lot. Absolutely. You can put, I would not be surprised. Again, put full stop. Nicholas Singleton, he's available. He's not 100%, but he's available. Singleton, Allen, and Prabula, run the triple option. It'll work. It will work. A Grunk and Beau package. If Ethan Grunkmeyer enters a game where Penn State is not leading by at least 28 or more points, that is bad. That was bad. Penn State's defensive line has struggled getting pressure lately. Carter is the only guy that gets pressure. Zane Durant is getting consistent pressure as well. The defense, Brandon Locke's getting rid of the football quickly. Like, all these offenses aside, I do think he had a little more time than he should have at times. He wasn't under duress quite a bit. That's why the Dani Dennis-Sutton injury is important to just kind of monitor, because all hands on deck. You need that down the stretch. But in Penn State's case, outside of Ohio State, there's really not these effective. There's these teams that they're facing other than a Will Rogers Washington team where pass rush won't matter as much. Ohio State and Washington, after that, you're facing run-heavy teams. I don't know what Purdue does. Purdue doesn't do anything heavy. They lose heavy. That's how I look at that. So don't look too much into Purdue there. Nebraska totally shut down the Buckeyes running game, only 68 yards on the ground. I think it's up to the Penn State defense. I'm glad you pointed that out, PSU Jim. The Nebraska's defense is still good. They're solid. And they created somewhat of a blueprint for Penn State. Like, you have to watch now, but I would still take that with a grain of salt. I don't look at the Nebraska game and it's like, Penn State should win. They should steamroll Ohio State. Absolutely not. You have to play the long game. Are you putting together your best playbook for Nebraska as a 28-point favorite? Are you putting that for a true freshman quarterback? Are you at home? Do you use your best playbook against Nebraska or Penn State? Number 3 team in the country, on the road at Beaver Stadium with college football and Big Ten conference implications. Who do you save your best plays for? Ohio State definitely dialed it back and thought that, hey, we can get a win with calling this for. That's why upsets happen if you're not careful. If you do not put a serious game plan enough, if you really dial it back and try to. That's why Ohio State scored in a matter of seconds there. It was 17-14, and Ohio State. I blinked and got the score update because I was out and saw that Ohio State had scored, and it was in the blink of an eye. And I said, yeah, because they called one of their better drives together. They had that in their back pocket. Drew Shelton versus JT Tuimoloau scares me. Yeah. Jack Sawyer against Anthony Donko or Nolan Rucci scares me. And you could flip them either way. I'm just being honest. This is a Penn State show. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. You're going to get a good amount of favorable coverage around Penn State. You're also going to get honest coverage too. I'm trying to give an honest assessment here. And if I'm being objective, I do not like that matchup of Tuimoloau is a first-round pick. Drew Shelton is, maybe someone wants to answer in the comments. I am optimistic that he is drafted at some point in time, but is that the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round? I don't know for sure. But first round is a lot better than 5th or 6th. And they'll win that matchup. So Drew Allar or Beau Pribula is going to have to play action, roll the pocket, right? Do things to allow the quarterback more time. And if Drew Allar isn't mobile enough, doesn't have enough mobility, then that's going to be a problem. And I don't know the severity of this injury, but depending on how serious it is, Penn State might want to lean towards playing Beau Pribula more in this game. Talked about it earlier. What's up with Dani Dennis-Sutton? A suspected groin injury. Looks like he pulled it at the end of the first half. Tried to give it a go early in the second half. Couldn't do it. Let's see here. Trying to get some last comments in here as we're almost to an hour. It's after midnight. It's 12:30. Appreciate everybody joining the show. Really, it's a lot of fun. And in 28-13 over Wisconsin, Penn State 7-0. They're going to stay in the top 4. Penn State controls its own destiny. 11-1, the most realistic scenario, but they can go 12-0. You call it fair. Well, I appreciate that. I want to be fair. This is obviously a Penn State show, but I do want to be fair. I liked Penn State. Wisconsin fans did not like that I was confident in my prediction. Am I supposed to be skeptical? Am I supposed to be skeptical that the Nittany Lions were going in? You do a little bit of research and it's okay. Braden Locke is prone to turning the football over. They don't average a lot of yards per pass. And if you look at the competition and you just point out like, hey, Rutgers is banged up. You played Purdue. You're playing all these teams that really don't offer a lot of resistance. Whereas Penn State is now battle tested. They have faced quality teams. Oh, but they were close against Bowling Green. Okay, read in between the lines here. KJ Winston got hurt that game. You don't think that had a big impact where the defense had to totally reinvent what they were doing? That's how valuable KJ Winston was, not only for the season, but in that moment. And Bowling Green is a MAC conference contender. Take that for what it's worth. Penn State should still win convincingly. They got to win. You know who didn't? Notre Dame against Northern Illinois, right? So Wisconsin fans were pretty upset with the fact that I was, hey, Penn State wins. I said 30-20. Wisconsin almost scored a garbage time touchdown there, but I was relatively in the ballpark. I said, hey, Penn State's going to get close to 30, give or take. Wisconsin should score about 17 to 20 points, and they didn't. Penn State held them to 13 points on the road in Camp Randall. And I said, you take away Tawee Walker, you take away this ground game, Wisconsin's not going to be able to handle it. And that's what happened. It was simple. But when it comes to Ohio State, you have Will Howard who can run the football and is a smart veteran quarterback. You have not one, but two, right? Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Ohio State has its own version of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, and then Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Ibuka, Carnell Tate, an offensive line that is still elite despite the problems at tackle. Ohio State is Penn State's toughest test to this point, and Penn State does not match up well at certain position groups. This is all in. This is a coaching battle here. If Penn State does win this game, the key to it is James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, and Tom Allen cooking up the overall team game plan of a lifetime. I'm serious. It is going to take the coaching ability like you have never seen before for Penn State versus Ohio State. That's what it's going to take because of some of the players that they're down. That's what it's going. James Franklin's going to have to return the favor here and outcoach Ryan Day with the help of Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen. We're at an hour. I'm gonna call it here after midnight on the East Coast. I thank you each and every one of you for joining the live show, contributing your thoughts and your comments, being a part of the conversation. Thank you so much. We're gonna have still more takeaways, talk to special guests about Penn State, Ohio State, talk some recruiting as well, have another crossover episode to preview Penn State versus Ohio State. So a week filled of daily content to get you ready for Penn State versus the Ohio State Buckeyes here on Locked On Nittany Lions. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. My name is Zach Seyko. Thanks so much for joining me on this live episode